Reading from Dallas Pimiento, Book 1, Bronco, Tony Torrey and the Inner Weave. He knew little about playing drums, certainly he knew next to nothing about jazz drumming, yet he was credited as the drummer on Bean Thirsty's 1975 release, Lock Into the Power. I went to the library to find out more about this odd figure in the history of recorded sound. "Why don't you just look him up on the internet?" Dallas Pimiento asked as we stepped out of the elevator on the 7th floor. "I must wean myself off the internet," I told my companion. He gave that response a comedic beat, then asked me why, as if this was a stupid idea of mine. "Because the internet and television are becoming the same," I explained. "They already will have become by the time the story of our adventure here is made public." I started to elaborate on my theory, but interrupted myself to demand, "Can ghosts see the future?" Pimiento considered it. "I don't know," he said. I turned to the bookshelves. "Anyway," I said, "this will be more fun. Who knows what we may find?" Pimiento watched me hunt among the titles. "Do you know the call number you're looking for?" "No, I don't even know that there is a specific book on this man." "Why don't you use the catalog at the computer over there?" Pimiento pointed at a computer sitting on a desk. "Too much work. I told you I don't really know what it is I'm looking for." "Then how will you find it?" "That's what the library is for, finding stuff you didn't know you were looking for." Pimiento sighed. "What's the man's name?" he asked. "Tony Torrey." "Tony Torrey," he repeated, walking over to the catalog terminal. As he searched, I continued to browse, moving generally in the direction I needed to go. After a few minutes, he returned to me with a book on Bean Thirsty. "It's the closest thing I could find," he said. "Look what I found," I said. I held up a Polaroid of a man standing next to a statue of Bugs Bunny that I had found inside a book on George Duke. Enumerated Solitude. The new headphones were appreciably louder than the old ones. They made it much easier for me to drown out the sound of the TV in the break room. After my recent campaign to lower the volume on the TV, someone from the clerk's unit had come in and permanently fixed the TV so that it could never be turned down, it could never be turned off, and it could never be switched to another channel. It stayed loud and on sports. With the new headphones, I was once again able to concentrate on my break time task of creating art. I was in the midst of doing so on this deafening Tuesday when Speak suddenly appeared in the seat opposite me. He didn't bother apologizing for interrupting me in my real work of the evening, as the others did before, begging me to draw a picture of their dog or to help their child with a school project. Speak got immediately to what he wanted to say. I don't see you much anymore," he said. I took off my headphones. "Yeah," I said. I made a pained expression. "It's your ghost friend, isn't it? Been spending most of your time with him." "My ghost friend?" I wrinkled my brow. I pretended I didn't know what he was talking about. "Yes, your ghost friend," Speak insisted. "I know all about him." I doubted that and told Speak so. "How do you know him?" I asked. "Everybody knows." He put my paranoia to work. "I don't spend most of my time with him," I countered. "Well, every time I call you, you're not home." "That doesn't mean anything," I said. "I've been very busy lately." "What have you been up to?" "I'm trying to get this new book done. It's going to be a book of my paintings. I'm debating writing a story for each one, but I don't know." "I think you should. I think writing is your strong suit." "Do you want to meet my ghost friend?" I asked Speak. "Aren't you the only one person who can see him?" He sounded cynical. "No, nor am I the only one who can hear him either." Domicile, undeservedly. The sound of elephants trumpeting and stampeding to Tarzan's aid suddenly blared from a small black gadget hanging from Jay's personalized belt. "Excuse me a minute," he said, putting our religious discussion on hold and the gadget up to his ear. "Truly, this must be an important call," I said to myself. "But why," I asked, "do I have to settle for merely telling myself?" I pulled an emergency puppet, Sox Malter, not one of my favorites, but the only one I had on hand, from the pocket of my homemade slacks. "I say, truly this must be an important call," I repeated for Malter's benefit. "Why is that?" Malter asked as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and picked lint from his sleeves. "Well, for one thing, he has interrupted our talk, which I really didn't want to have in the first place, to take this ethereal summons. And for another, we have the matter of the special gadget on which he speaks to his mysterious caller. Is it not special indeed? He has games one can only play on it, and not only does it allow one to be within the reach of the telephone at all times, one can receive pornographic pictures on it to share with workmates and giggle over." Malta replied with a shake of the head, "Truly you must be a bitter man." "Why do you say that?" "You're so contrary to this age you find yourself living in. It all offends you." "Well, I'd love to continue this discussion," I said, "but it looks like Jay's call is coming to an end." I started to remove Malta from my hand. "You're going to do the same thing to me that Jay did." He was silenced as contact was broken. I stuffed him back in my pocket. "Sorry about that, but that was God," Jay said. "Oh, and did he give you any pointers?" I asked. "What was that?" Jay pointed to my pocket. "That's a mighty big condom." I sighed. "That was my version of the cell phone. It's a highly advanced, sophisticated invention." "Oh, yeah? Well, God said that even if you don't believe in your heart, isn't it better to just play along out of the fear of the unknown?" The trash greeters. Speak arrived at my studio about midnight. I was in the middle of working on a painting of 3 boys torturing a dog man with puppets and cameras under the watchful eyes of 3 grown-up men. I put my brush in a container of water when he knocked and opened the door to him. He entered carrying a cup of coffee and a CD. "Where's your ghost friend?" he asked as he took a seat on the sofa. "He's in that briefcase there." I indicated the case I had bought for Dallas Pimiento. It lay on a chair next to the sofa. The case now bore several stickers that Pimiento had put on it. "You're kidding," Speak said. "No, I'm not." "Are you ready?" "Sure." I flipped the catches on the case and lifted the top. I reached in and grasped Pimento's hand. With a grunt on both our parts, he stepped into the studio. "Thanks," he said. He noted Speak almost immediately. He nodded at him. "Hello," he said. "Hello," Speak returned the greeting. "Dallas, this is Speak Osnabrook. We've known each other for 30 years. I introduced my old friend. They shook hands. "I'm Dallas Pimiento, the ghost," Pimiento added humorously. "Your hand feels solid," Speak told him. "There's a technical reason for that." Pimiento glanced at me as if I could explain. "It's because you're not technically dead," I said. "Yes, I am," Pimiento snapped. I smiled at Speak. "We won't get into that now, okay?" "Okay," Speak agreed. Pimiento had to go along with that. "It's good to meet you," he told Speak. "You too. Lance tells me you're divorced." Speak smiled at me. "We won't get into that now, okay?" Pathos of the flagrant. Too bad the vending machine company hadn't seen the advantages of stocking their coin-operated dispenser robots with fresh hot rice. I would have bought some. As it was, I had to make do with rice from home and the maple syrup-flavored donuts stolen from the supervisor's office. "Say, pal," I asked a passerby, "do you think the TV is loud enough in here?" I sounded like a homeless drunk bumming change. After my lunch break was over, I turned to my place on the workroom floor. This was a 3-foot square painted in safety yellow in which I was to stand and pitch bricks of compressed human feces into the yawning furnace below the Omega sorter, a tall robot bolted to the floor. The Postal Service had fought for years to keep us from using gloves when handling the bricks, something to do with punishing us for sins committed in past lives. But luckily the Union, in a rare display of, well, what's the best antonym for lethargy, the Union fought for our right to wear the gloves it provided for us at a moderately discounted rate. Fueling the Omega sorter was not my only job. No, indeed. If it had been, my nights would have been passed in a relatively benign, trance-like state. No, the other significant activity was clearing the jams of mail that occasionally built up. The Omega sorter could work thousands of pieces of mail of all sizes with its 10 boom-like arms, but it could not clean out its own insides. Lucky for us, the union representative kept reminding us. So, I was alternately pitching crap into the machine's mouth or climbing into its rectum, depending on which point of view you took. Speak called to me from across the floor. He was standing in his own yellow square, doing the same thing for the Omega sorter he was shackled to and that I was to mine. "Hey," he yelled. "What?" "I had a good time at your studio this weekend." "Good," I yelled back. "I'm glad." "Dallas is a good guy." "Yeah," I nodded, then turned back to my work. I pushed the play button on my antique CD player and let Alice Cooper soothe my so-called spirit. folding chair. From where I sat, the beans appeared to be jumping across the top of the TV. This was, I knew, merely an illusion caused by the heat rising from the back of the entertainment unit. In truth, the beans were walking ordinarily, shod in their soft-soled athletic shoes. My antagonism towards TV extends to being not hooked up to cable, but not to denying myself the watching of recorded movies. On this occasion, I was watching an old Woody Allen movie, A Funeral on Fifth Avenue. In it, Allen portrays Skip Raleigh, a rich socialite who discovers he is adopted after the death of his mother. There are 3 funerals in the film, each one symbolic of the protagonist's deeper insight into his own identity. I had just reached the second funeral, the one at which Sean Connery reads of the moving elegy to his and Allen's mutual second cousin Daisy, when the beans stopped walking and began to rappel down the left side of the TV. My son had left a foam dart shooting toy gun on the sofa. I picked it up. Had it been on the floor across the room, I would have been out of luck. I was too tired to move around much. The gun was loaded. I fired, not even bothering to pause the action on TV. Connery went ahead with his verbal abuse of Allen as they walked to their cars. I knocked at least 3 beans into oblivion with the first shot. Their screaming started immediately. Tiny fists were shaken in my direction. I cocked the gun again. Years of throwing mail had given me a greater aim than I had had back in my school days, when a good aim might have made me more acceptable to the other kids. I say kids, but really I mean boys. Girls don't much care how far you can throw or how accurately. I blasted another couple of beans off the TV. My wife came into the room. "What are you doing?" she needed to know. "Shooting beans off the TV," I said. "Why, may I ask?" They're interrupting my enjoyment of the film. This was more words and more elaborately constructed than I would usually speak to her. Girls do care about that. "What are you watching?" I told her. "Do you want to join me?" I invited. "No, whiny Jews are not my idea of entertainment," she declined. Onometrics. Sometimes people ask me why I don't paint real things, real people. My art is realistic after a fashion, but to depict the outside world is boring to me. To Dallas Pimiento, however, it is not, apparently, for that is all he paints. When Pimiento first started to paint, I told him up front that there was no way he could share my studio. He might, in effect, be living with me, but there was no way he was going to paint with me. Those paintings of mythological subjects done by a dozen people in Java that each signs his name to, that has always been anathema to me. One man's expression, that's the way I see painting. I agree with the auteur theory, not only in cinema but in all of art. Pimiento, therefore, took up space in a small room in the larger structure that houses my studio. I call my studio the caboose. Pimiento called his the tender. I didn't bother offering to give him any instruction or little hints. I thought that would be insulting. If he wanted me, he could ask. I had taught myself. I knew he could do the same. It surprised me, however, that I started seeing models and props being brought in. He was really going to go at this thing all the way. "Are you using oils?" I asked Pimiento one day when I could no longer stand not knowing how things were going. I hadn't even visited the tender yet. "No, acrylics," he said. "Good man," I endorsed his plan. It staggered me when one day I saw Speak heading into Pimento's studio. I had once painted him as a cowboy using a photograph back when I was still learning and hadn't settled on my cartoon-like style of pure fantasy. That Pimiento was going to paint Speak meant more than just a growing confidence on his part. It meant that they had established a friendship of their own, a third arm of a triangle. This irked me not a little. That and my desire to see how Pimento's depiction of Speak looked led me to climb into this disused heating conduit and crawl through it to a vantage point high on the wall where I could spy on them both. Was Pimiento really painting Speak in the nude? It was hard to see. He had so many crazy props in his tiny space, I could only see a shoulder here, a kneecap there. Finally, I got a good look at the canvas itself. What a relief it was to me to see just how crappy it was. Pollywogs wonk from the inaccessible floor. Since Pimiento and Speak had fallen out with each other over the former's inept and unflattering depiction of the latter, I felt it necessary to lay low for a while, hiding out from each in case one wanted me to take sides against the other. In pursuit of this goal, I took a little trip into the foothills of the Georgia mountains, where I came across a farm that proudly advertised a large mechanical sheep. Name's Bodrum, Earl Bodrum, the owner introduced himself as he put out a big, flat hand for me to shake. I'm Lance Ash, I replied, bracing myself for the brutal grip and the seismic shake. Where are you from? Bodrum asked me as he led me to the corral wherein the sheep could be found. Just outside Athens, I said. I usually said this. People knew Athens, but not Somaton. Very good. You think the dogs are going to do it this year? I don't know, I answered lamely. Oh, if I could only tell the stranger precisely how little I cared about the performances of any sporting team of any kind, anywhere in the world. Think they'll beat Tuck? He asked. Where was the damn sheep? I asked myself. I don't know, I said, more strongly this time. One more question, and I will be forced to be rude. Here she is, Bodrum pointed as we came within view of the corral. He didn't charge for the opportunity to see the sheep. He used it as a gimmick to draw people in, hoping to sell them homemade preserves and fresh produce. What does it run on? I asked as I looked over the fence. Hay, grass, regular sheep feed. Amazing. The sheep did little more than move about. Bodrum whistled, which brought the sheep to us. It put its head over the fence. You want to feed her? Bodrum asked me. He pulled out a carrot from the pocket of his coat. Sure. I took the carrot and stuck it in nibbling range. The rubbery, prehensile lips and piano-key teeth pulled it in. The sheep's eyes were dead. Who made it? I asked. I don't really know. I've been trying to find out for almost 3 months. It behooved me to purchase a jar of apple butter and a couple of tomatoes. Pushing the wheelbarrow. Doesn't your family miss you when you take off on such an extended, impromptu journey? A female reader from Sweden asked in regard to my rather sudden evacuation of my native Somaton. Indeed, they do miss me, and I miss them. However, the demands of my identity are such that I must meet them as loyally as I do those of supplying my family with food, gasoline, and toys. Do not think that I completely abandoned my family during my trip. We stayed in constant contact. In fact, it was almost as constant and immediate a contact as that I enjoy with my readers around the world, like the delightful Swedish woman mentioned above, who thoughtfully included a picture of her 2 dogs with her letter. As I was passing through the replicate Italian hamlet of Lucretia, I received a communication from my wife Elsa. Lance, her face appeared on the dashboard screen. Yes, I had a funnel cake on a paper plate in my lap when she called. I answered with a forkful of the treat in my hand. Are you eating while driving? She demanded. You didn't call to ask that, I said as I put the piece in my mouth. Tell me you're not eating while driving. Okay, I'm not, I swallowed. Why would you eat while driving? Because I'm hungry? Why can't you stop and eat? Have a nice picnic beside a mountain stream. Elsa, what did you call for? Nothing. Nothing at all. Her mouth was pursed in anger. You had to have something in mind besides. She hung up on me. I so much wanted to drive the car off the side of the road, plunge down the mountain to certain death. That would show her. What held me back was the thought of completing this book and the idea that I could achieve the same ends by having her read it. I knew I would suffer for that in the long run, however, so I decided to be a good guy and call her back. When I finally succeeded in getting her on screen and talking, she told me what brats the children were. Let's have a parade. While I was gone, Dallas Pimiento got into the puppets. He put one on each hand. The one in his left hand was Solomon Fowler, a gentleman from Rome. The one on his right was Socks Malter, whom we met earlier. Tonight on Orbital Transaction, our topic is the stupidity of the average American, Pimiento began. With me is Medford Lincoln, a professor of philosophy at Bristlecone University. He paused and looked at Fowler to allow the latter to acknowledge his introduction. Fowler looked at Pimiento uncertainly. He glanced at Malter, then turned back to Pimiento. Are you talking to me? He asked. Yes, Professor Lincoln, Pimiento chuckled indulgently. My name is Solomon Fowler. He wants you to pretend, Socks Malter explained. What do you mean? Fowler asked. Pimento's doing some kind of play or skit. You see, like for instance, Malter turned to Pimiento. Who am I supposed to be? Mr. Fishlong, don't you know? Pimento's chuckle was less indulgent, more pained this time. Fishlong, Malter repeated. Okay, got it. See, Solomon, I am supposed to be somebody called Mr. Fishlong. I don't understand, Fowler shook his head. I don't want to do some kind of play or skit. Gentlemen, Pimiento broke in, this is Orbital Transaction, a weekly program covering current topics of interest to today's intellectual. On the radio? Malter asked. On TV! Pimiento pointed forward towards you and I sitting in our comfortable place of observation. Fowler looked in the direction indicated by Pimento's finger. I don't see a TV, he said. What about that TV camera? Pimento begged. What are you talking about? That's a blank wall. Can't you just play along? Pimento whined through gritted teeth. Malter sighed a sigh of enlightenment. Oh, I see, he said. You've mistaken us for that other kind of puppet.